Okay, testing one, two, three. I'm hoping this is going to work. So, hey everyone, welcome to the stream. This is we're getting onto second week of doing this live, almost every day. This is kind of like a weekly wrap up that I've been doing on Saturdays. Did the first one last Saturday. This is the second one, and the idea of the stream today is just to, kind of summarize the work that I've been doing, answer any questions if people come online with, my process, how to also, people that are interested in creating real world landscapes and 3D software, and just kind of share what I was able to accomplish during the week. If you're brand new to this is kind of part accountability stream for me. It's a way as an artist to focus in on specific tasks and be able to, know that I have to come in every day and stream and, create progress and have a plan and not just be kind of wandering through a bunch of different experiments and things that I've typically done in the 3D art world. So that's what this is about. Along the way, I hope to be able to share some really cool things that I've learned as my journey as a 3D artist coming from the photography and videography world. Answer some questions, be able to share some clips of some of the best and most kind of interesting parts of the week, and generally just make this sort of part of my daily routine when it comes to creating art. So before I go too much further, I do have to double check something because this is the first time that I've ever used Streamlab, and the goal here was to, experiment and see if I could use some software. Let me just close this. Actually, hopefully it's still okay. Use this software that I think is going to help me with a few things specifically related to the multi-streaming that I am doing. So, all of this is sort of up for conversation. I'm figuring it out as I go, but currently I'm just streaming out to, pretty much all the platforms that I can access. That is Twitch, which is new to me. I'm just kind of starting out on Twitch and learning how it works and the whole process, and that's where I've been streaming most of the time. But I also have a YouTube channel, so I've been experimenting with streaming live there. I've been pushing it out to my Facebook fan page. This is another experiment. And also to Twitter, or X, which is the one that causes a little bit of pain because it doesn't really have a built-in chat. It's hard for me to monitor Twitter if people are commenting or chiming in. I don't know whether this is the right approach or this is the long-term approach. I think I plan to probably reevaluate things. Maybe I'll talk about it here on the stream. If people join that have experience with streaming, I get your opinion and get your thoughts. But I'm kind of between, just continuing this process of just streaming on multiple platforms. You can find me wherever you are and chime in when you want, or going back to a Twitch stream every single day, and then on the weekends doing kind of this special stream on YouTube and Twitter and Facebook, and making it a little bit more of like a weekly wrap up. Obviously, I don't expect anyone to be joining me every single day watching me stream, so it sort of gives a context of what I've been working on. But at the same time, it's just, I don't really know what the right approach is. So before we go anywhere, I'm going to just take 2 seconds to double check all of these platforms and make sure that they're streaming, and make sure that I didn't completely mess something up with the new Streamlab process. So I'll just talk through it as I go. Okay, so I see on my fan page on Facebook, it looks like it did go live with a bit of a description. I'm just going to click it, and it looks like we are live, and it does look like there is like a live chat here and everything is good. So I'll just drop a like, and I'll just say good afternoon. And while that happens, okay, I do see my comment. I'm going to get some chat up here because now that I'm using Streamlabs, it's a little bit different. So I think there should be pretty straightforward for me to get like a kind of a global chat onto this list. Just give me a second to find it. Chat box, that might be it. Feel pretty good about this one. And we will see, it's on the screen now. We'll see whether this actually works in terms of chat. The other thing you're going to notice, okay, cool. So I can actually see some stuff here. Hi, Maria, on Facebook. It's probably super creepy, right? I mean, it shows that people join. I guess it doesn't do that on Twitch, which is interesting. But yeah, the Facebook Live looks pretty cool. I'm just going to share that out to my own personal account. Live stream weekly update. I promise we'll get into this in a second. Just kind of got to make sure this is all running. Okay, second one is Twitter or X, because this one has been a little bit of a manual process to get running. Let me see. Doesn't look like maybe that one worked. Okay, well that's fine. It's going somewhere. I don't know where it's going. Oh, no, maybe it's... No, that was the 15th, 16th. Okay. So I'll have to get Twitter figured out, or X figured out in here. I was using, hey Maria, I was using Restream before, which is a tool to do this. I won't get too technical, and you know, based on who's here too, will be kind of fun to talk about different things. So that's working. I got to check a couple more real quick. So we'll check YouTube and see if the YouTube channel is up and running. Looks like it is, so that's good news. I'm just going to say hello, and let's just see if anything pops up on my screen on the chat. So far, nothing. All right. Well, we'll see what happens there. Okay, so that's fine, and then I'll look into that, and then I'll just do one for Twitch. And double check to see if that one's live. That one looks like it is. Switching over. Stream Manager. Hello. Okay, so interesting. Something I'll have to sort of figure out. It looks like the YouTube link is the one that's not working, which is odd. Oh, that one. Okay, they're coming through. So it's just a little bit of a delay. And you can see the chat down in the bottom left of the screen. Other thing quickly that's a little different today is I've got this sort of widescreen thing going here. This is my monitor's wide. I don't have like a multiple monitor setup, although I found an old monitor and put it up over here so I can actually see what's going on. But I work and like to work on this widescreen monitor, and that's not particularly great for streaming, but because this is actually what I'm doing every day, I didn't want to compromise that. So I'm going to look into some options. I have ideas of how to sort of make this fill more of the screen, or, you know, have different interactive pieces. But maybe today, later on in the stream, I'll be kind of going through some ideas of how I might do that. I might test some things, again, depending the audience. If you have experience streaming, I always like to kind of get some help on how this works. Okay, so we're going to try this. So let me just kind of walk you through what it is that this stream is about and what I'm working on. And then, you know, if you have questions, just hit me up in the chat. Say hi. I appreciate you, Maria, for doing that. Yeah, just say hi and ask away anything you want to know. And I'll use this time to answer it. It just should be about a 2-hour stream altogether today. We'll see how it goes, but that's the plan. And we'll get into it. Okay, so the quick backstory is I've been kind of a semi-professional, let's call it, photographer and videographer for the last probably 5 years. Semi-professional because I was working full-time while I was doing the photo and video work on the side, so professional, I guess. And along the way, you know, when COVID happened, I actually started to learn 3D modeling, and that was sort of a new thing. We couldn't work during COVID, and along that process, I got, you know, good enough or competent enough in 3D software like Blender to start to play with creating some animations, some 3D models, some really fun stuff for me because it was a completely new world that I dove into. And it didn't take me long to realize that, like, my background as a landscape photographer, some of my technical background, some of the work that I did in remote sensing and GIS gave me like a really interesting, unique perspective that not a lot of people that come into the 3D space have. And it, you know, kind of occurred to me at some point during that process that, hey, wouldn't it be cool if I could actually recreate a real world location in 3D, bring all that data into the 3D software and actually, you know, compose a landscape photo that would look as close as possible to a real life landscape photo as I could. And the advantage of that was like, hey, if I can create that and kind of get that running, you know, I could go to a location, I could scout, I could get reference photos, I could still kind of do all the fun stuff that I've been doing as a photographer and a videographer. But it's like well, COVID kind of woke up things for me a bit because we lost a lot of contracts. I couldn't work. The parks were closed. It was like, hey, this is something where like I could probably do this for the rest of my life. Like even if I can only travel to those locations, it's an easier physical thing for me as I got older. It would be something I could continue to do. It's protective against if you can't travel to a particular location or you don't have the money to go. There's this huge advantages, but the biggest one is like, hey, if I could actually get this data and actually bring it into 3D software, like it doesn't have to stop at a photo. I could create a landscape photo, but then I could actually continue on and change the lighting and turn it into a time lapse, or move the camera from one side to the other and make it like a cinematic sequence. And then I thought, well, if I could do that, like maybe I could actually turn this into like a 3D environment, and maybe we could actually visit this world in virtual reality. And then I started thinking, well, holy crap, this might be pretty cool. The world is getting difficult to travel. We just dealt with a pandemic not too long ago. We've got issues with certain locations due to overcrowding, global warming, whatever you want to say. Just this is sort of might be something that people would really appreciate in the future. Obviously, if you can travel to Moraine Lake or to Hawaii or to, some of these beautiful places around the world, you want to do it. But what's the next best thing? And that idea was kind of what birthed this idea of me recreating these landscapes in 3D, and started me on a kind of a pretty crazy journey to get where I am today. So as of a year ago, I quit my job. I've been working on this full time. Mostly I've been creating art and selling it as NFTs and Web3. But along the way, I've been doing what I would say a lot of research and development. That's kind of my background, that I've been kind of working in the tech world. And I think I'm, getting very close to a place where I feel like I confidently have a workflow to convert any real world location around the world into like a fully interactive 3D environment. Hopefully that you'll be able to visit as the technology gets better, and in virtual reality, or with your Xbox or PlayStation or your PC or Nintendo Switch or whatever it's going to be. You'll be able to interact with that, visit it, and actually have an experience of that location through my work. So what the goal of the stream is going to be to introduce you to that process, share a little bit of what I work on, kind of show my process and behind the scenes, and obviously have a lot of clips and content that I can share out to social media as I kind of continue to build my brand and my credentials as an artist, and work on, becoming, I think, my goal is to become the best in the world at this, and to be known for someone who sort of cracked this code with the real world data. So we're going to dive into kind of what I'm working on now, where I'm at. And again, Q&A, if you have questions, hit me up with a comment or whatever you want. If you just want to tune in and listen, that's cool. And if you're like, what the heck is this, he's doing this makes no sense, no hard feelings. I'll try to share some of the best of and the kind of the most interesting parts of this process as clips soon on my social media. Okay. So let's start. This has been on front of my screen here as we've been working, and I'll sort of walk you through this. We're also going to update this today with some of the stuff that I've been working on. So let's just go left to right, and I'll walk you through what I'm doing here in terms of 3D data. Okay, so the first thing is the location that we care about for right now. This is the current on my desk real world location that I'm focused on, is a place in Sedona, Arizona, USA called Cathedral Rock. And to give you an idea, let's grab a window and we're going to bring it in here. It's going to be a little bit new for me as I switch screens, but we're going to go to earth.google.com. Actually, that's not what we want to go to, earth.google.com. And I'm going to show you exactly where it is that I'm focused on with this project. So we're not signed in, but that's okay. If we go in here and we look at the map, and this is Sedona, Arizona, we can kind of zoom out to see where we are. If we zoom in to Sedona and we look for the airport, is kind of my typical point of reference. It's actually over here, Oak Creek. As I say, yeah, I was like, God, completely turned around there. Okay, so I look for the airport, and then I look for this mound right here. And this mound is called Cathedral Rock. And you can see it kind of sticks out from the landscape. And you can see, there's some trails and some roads and stuff around here. And of course, we're in Google Earth, so if we just do one of these, you can get a feel for what this is. And what makes this interesting, besides some, interesting like energy vortex stuff that I don't really understand, maybe someone else out there does, there's actually this weird energy vortex that shows up on the map in between the rock, and I don't really understand it. But this is a pretty iconic place, and it's really a beautiful view. From here, you can see there's sort of these three distinct peaks. There's mountain ranges kind of in the background, but it stands out a little bit from the landscape. And you can view it from a lot of locations, but the place that I first saw it from, that was what prompted me to really, get excited and want to make this piece of art, is this place over here called Secret Slick Rock Trailhead. And if you come along here, you drive your car down here in Sedona, and you hit this little road, and you park right here where I did for multiple days, actually more like in this spot, and you walk down this trailhead, which happens to be right here, kind of winds through the landscape, and eventually it comes out on this little mound here. You can see the trails coming down. That's sort of like an exposed red rock part of the landscape. And if you just sort of scroll down here and zoom, you can see what I saw the first time I ever went to Slick Rock in Sedona. And although this is Google Earth and, the resolution's not great, there's a lot of blotchiness on the trees, you get a good feel for what you're actually experiencing here, which is a really beautiful red rock formation that's coming out above the earth, directly across from this valley, and there's a river running through here. It's just a really beautiful scene. And what makes this scene even more spectacular is these little formations here on the top of the rock. So if you look at it from this view, you might not notice it when you're there, but you look at it from this view, you can see there's some really interesting erosion going on across this rock face. And where this is coming from is basically rain. It rains here not that often, but when it does, you've got tons of water that's sort of trickling down and creating these little formations in the rock. And if you look at this over here, you can see two green patches, one here, and you can see this sort of one little circular area and two little circular areas. And the cool thing is when it actually rains in Sedona, if you go there the next day or, pretty quickly after it rains, these puddles will fill with water. It doesn't last long. They eventually just sort of drain out, evaporate, or soak into the rock. You get an incredible reflection. And what you probably already saw on this screen is that exact location right here. You can see the puddle. You can see the cactus patch, which is actually what the green is. You can see Sedona Cathedral rock in the background. And if you take your camera and you drop it into this puddle and keep it really close to the water, this is what you get. So you get actually this photo that, to me, and if to someone who maybe has never been here, you might look at this and be like, this is a lake or a pond or something kind of, bigger than it actually is. In photography, we call this forced perspective. We're basically kind of tricking your eye into thinking that things are a different size than they are. These cactuses can sometimes look giant. They're pretty actual small. These mounds of dirt are just very, very tiny. They're literally these little tiny pieces of mud in the landscape. And, this lines up perfectly in the frame where you get this sort of really cool effect of it feeling like you're in a lake, in a place where a lake doesn't exist. And now to me, this is like the magic of photography, right? Because, you can come to this location with me, you can feel this location, we can go there, but like there's something about this photo that really gives you like a different feeling. And the truth is, it's not a feeling that I would have necessarily felt while I was there, because the perspective of this is totally different. But when I come back, I look at it, I'm like, holy, this is like, makes me feel something about this particular location. And if I, edit this photo and share it, that's why, landscape photography is so beautiful and people love it. And I certainly have never stopped and will never stop taking landscape photos the way that I do. But I felt like there was something here, and I could actually bring this to another level where people could maybe get an even better experience than they would getting a photo. So these are references. These are real photos I took on location. This one here is actually a time lapse, which won't play on the software. But if we drop into my folder and we go to Cathedral and we go to output, and we go to the story. We can look for our movies, and we can open up this one. And I could play this full screen on the stream, but I'm still learning. You can just see here, if I play this, you can see the time lapse of the clouds going across the landscape. Okay, so I do this because, I mean, this is, really cool time lapse, but I do this because I'm starting to understand and learn how the light goes across the landscape in a photo like this. Like, for example, take a look at what's going on in the bottom with the trees. So you can tell now, these are the trees when they're lit. These are the trees when they're under shadow. And this is like really important information for me as a 3D artist, because as I start to build out my scene, I can use this as a reference and say, hey, is the light actually kind of bouncing off the scene the way that it actually was in real life? So this is why I kind of gather this information, and I sort of understand how these scenes react to light under different conditions to help me with my renders. Okay, so then the next thing I do is, I got all these references. I take some close-ups of the rocks. I do a bunch of scanning. I really go through and take a pretty detailed approach to collecting data. And one of the things I do, which I shouldn't have closed that, it's not actually showing up in the scene, is I do something called photogrammetry. So let me see. Oh, let's play this one first. This is actually how I captured this photo. So you can see my hands down here in the water, and boom, that's the photo that you see on the screen there. The LiDAR looks something like this. And you can actually see this. This is my LiDAR scanner on my phone going around and actually taking a 3D scan of this part of the landscape. So of these rocks, and I have some more of this sort of cactus formation here. And I'll show you in a second that this actually becomes a massive part of what I do. If you take a peek at this image here and you see these cactuses, and you go over to my 3D render, which, a bit of a spoiler reveal, this is it right here. This cactuses are actually a 3D photo scan of those cactuses that I took on site. So it's not just like I took a photo of it and I, cropped it out and put it into Photoshop. I'll show you in a second. This is actually a full 3D recreation. So I could have moved it anywhere I wanted in the scene. I could manipulate it. I could edit, change the angle. But those are actually the real photo scans of the cactuses from on location. From there, I go out and look for, okay, what other data might I need to recreate this landscape? And this is where my kind of, amateur experience in GIS work comes in. So I worked for 2 companies that were in the GIS world, and that stands for Geographic Information Systems. Basically, it's the study of spatial data. So it's kind of the idea of data that actually is linking or mapping to like a map or a globe or a world. It has a real world location, and there's a whole big science behind this, a very difficult one that I'm kind of continuing to learn and grow on. But what I did know that I needed, and you can see it on this map, is I needed like a terrain, a height map, something that would turn this location and the data from this location into a 3D object that I can manipulate in my software. And as it turns out, this is can be a very difficult process, because it's not just about getting any height map or data. It's about getting quality data so that all of the little details of the landscape come through when you create a 3D render. So in this case, what I was able to do was not only get some free data, which was sort of a basic height map of the region with different elevations and some stuff I could use, but I actually acquired LiDAR data from the municipality in Sedona. And this LiDAR data came from a flood that they had in Sedona, I think in 2016. The study was done. I can't remember when the flood was. Maybe it was 2009. But they take an airplane, they fly it around the area, and they put this little system on the side that shoots lasers at the ground. I mean, literally, it sounds like made up, but it's true. Shoots lasers at the ground, and it measures the time that it takes for those lasers to come back. And essentially from that is able to tell the distance that those points on the ground are from the lasers. You do a bunch of triangulation, you run a bunch of math, and you can actually determine what the elevation of the terrain is. And that's what you're looking at here. You're looking at all these little tiny, tiny points. The red points are the highest elevation, then it goes into yellow and green and blue. And you map these points. There's, what is that number? 987 million points that get mapped to the terrain. And ultimately what you create is something like this. Again, red being the highest elevation, yellow, green, and blue. Convert all that into another file. It ends up looking like this, where the lighter the pixels are on the screen, the higher the elevation, the lower the pixels are, the darker the pixels are, the lower the elevation. So I got this data plus some stuff like contour maps, which help me understand, where the actual, terrain is and sort of help me understand as I'm creating the software, and some satellite images. This one's upside down, but basically some information around, what does this actual scene look like? And you can kind of get an idea. You can almost overlay these on top of each other, and you could kind of imagine what this would look like. And I can show you that in a second. From there, I actually compile all this and bring it into some 3D tools, and that converts these static images like this, these still height maps, into some actual terrain that I can manipulate. And then I can sort of look at different heights. I can, have the terrain even run it through some like erosion simulations. I can determine where the trees might be, where the lakes might be, the rivers might be. I can manipulate this terrain to make it as detailed as I possibly can. And then I can, from there, bring it into 3D software, in this case, Blender, where you can actually see this terrain map with what looks like a very similar outline to our original photo right here. Then you do a bunch of stuff in Blender that is incredibly painful and difficult, but basically you'd start to manipulate this, add textures, add lighting, adjust the camera position, add in objects for detail, and eventually you get, closer and closer to something that looks, as photorealistic as you can get. For example, this is my first ever attempt at doing this, and you can see, from this, we got to this, and that was over probably months of just like testing, experimenting, and trying to figure this out. And I continue to evolve, continue to learn, and hopefully each one of these will be better as I go. So this, eventually turns into this, and now we have our first, let's call it piece of art, first asset from Sedona in Arizona. This is a piece that I created, I released on a platform called Super Rare. The piece is called Cathedral. People can purchase it as a piece of digital art, and that is my first step in my creative process, is to get to a place where I can actually have an actual still image, rendered landscape, whatever we want to call it, from my location I care about. And then the next step is, all right, well, what do we want to create from here? And this kind of diverges into a couple different paths. So one of those paths is everything you see on this part of the screen. And this is like a concept piece. In Web3, we call it a meme card, or it's a derivative. It's sort of a piece of art that gets created that's a bit of a tribute to the culture of Web3, of NFTs, decentralization, crypto, the movement that was happening and that continues to happen for artists in that space. So I did one of these before. It was a successful project. So now I want to create some version of this derivative, this meme card, from each of the pieces of art. So what I do is I take this as my base and say I want to create something inside of this world. And the part of the fun of what I do is that I can manipulate the camera angles, I can change the lighting, the position, without affecting, the actual full landscape, and can create something that is, from the same location without repeating work, but is a completely new piece of art. So I get a bunch of reference images. In this case, I was, sort of experimenting with the idea of a fishing scene, because if you look at here, you would think, well, this is a nice little lake to go fishing in. It's actually a puddle, but I thought it would be a cool idea. I grab reference photos. I start to pull in different assets that I want to kind of use or pay tribute to. how water, and roughness of the water and wind reflects, what this Volkswagen would look like on the side of the pond, what a headlamp would look like. And then this is where I currently got to. This is my progress last week. Earlier in the week, I'll probably actually update this to show, the weekly progress. But I was like probably only here. I think I was on this one only this week. I just kind of created this landscape and had put this guy in fishing. I think I maybe just finished this sort of transparent part with the fish underneath. And this week I started to work on the meme version, the night version of this, which included sort of making a more night style tribute to Web3 culture using that same location. By the end of the week, I was here. So this piece is very similar with a bit of color grading and detail. You kind of see it here. And then now on this side, I've come a long way on this piece. There's still a lot of work to do, including fixing up this rainbow fishing line and some lighting stuff. And there's a couple more things to add. But this is sort of where we currently sit when it comes to the 3D art that I'm creating from that meme card or from that location. And the end result is I will layer these two on top of each other. I'll add some music, some animation, and I'll have a little video file that I'll create and share that will represent, my derivative or meme card from this location. And then the next part that I'm working on, which is sort of the more experimental part of what I do, definitely a area that requires a lot of trial and error, a lot of testing, a lot of, frustrating days, but is turning this into an interactive 3D world that you could actually walk around in. So there was a little hiccup here, which is going to make this stream kind of interesting as I walk you through this. But one of the first things that I realized when I went down this path, I'm still importing. So I think we're going to lose my progress downloading some data here. Maybe I'll stall a bit and see if it works. If not, we're just going to have to kill this and I'll show you the scene. One of the problems with what I created, actually, maybe I can just do another Blender instance. It might be a little bit slow, but maybe I can just pull that off. Actually, I don't want this. Give me a second. I don't want Blender 3.6. This probably is a bad idea. How many Blender instances can I have open at the same time? Give me a second here. I'm on the other screen. Where is... Oh, no, that's not what I want. Yeah, let's try this. This file is going to be open. Yeah, I think this will be an interesting, at least, explanation. So, one of the things that I quickly realized when it came to this data that I was working with is actually we'll open up my actual card, which will help tell the story here. So, active projects, Cathedral, working, Blender, meme card. Here. What's that? Okay, so let's bring this in. Give this a second. There we go. So we'll close this. Okay, so one of the things that was unique about this project is if you kind of look at the data that I'm dealing with, it looks like this. So over here on this side, if I kind of flip my mouse and then zoom in, there we go. This is the LiDAR data that I had. And you can actually see with a little bit of manipulation, obviously just as, a clay render, you can see there's like a pretty good amount of detail in here. You can really see where the rocks are. You can see the elevation changes. You can see, pretty good feeling for what this looks like up here. On this side, you can see, this is from a 3D standpoint, this is plenty of data to work with to make something that looks realistic. these things are kind of byproducts of me, doing some manipulation of the data that you don't see on camera. But essentially this file up here, this, and this is really the high resolution data. But then if you kind of look, you go into this river valley here and it gets really low elevation, and there's sort of like, looks like there's missing data. And as it turns out, the data that I have, my vantage point where I would have taken my photo would actually be probably something like back here from about this location. And I didn't have the data that I needed to actually fully do this the way I wanted, which was put the camera exactly where it would be in the real world and create the scene as realistic to the, the actual location as possible. So I had to kind of take a shortcut, and I had to kind of make this little scene up here with the proper terrain. I had to add a bunch of things in. And if you bring my camera down here and zoom out and change our aspect ratio back to 1920 by 1080, you can kind of like get a feel for where my actual 3D render was. It kind of looks similar to what I did right here. And in fact, if I go into the scene and I switch this over to the day mode, which is going to be the one that has all of the day scene, and I change the camera back, and I again change this to 1920 by 1080, and I get rid of a few things that I don't need for the actual location. So I don't need any of the camping, I don't need the balloons, I don't need the underwater, and I don't need, I think that's it. And if I flip this over to rendered and I make this full screen so you can see it, and just give this a second to sort of compile everything. I think I'm also running something in the background, which I might have to kill because it's going to probably slow down the stream pretty bad. Let's give it a few seconds to see if it can. There we go. I think we're good. So there you go. There's my 3D render of Cathedral, and it, like, the lighting's a little slightly different, but that's all from like actually rendering it out in high quality, bringing it into Photoshop and Lightroom and manipulating it like a regular photo. This is basically it. Give or take, this is the actual scene, right? And now we can actually go and move the camera up to this spot. So now you can just see it's just literally moving from here. It's moving up, over, and tilting. That's all we did. And then we changed our aspect ratio to 1350 by 1080. Sorry, 1080 by 1350, which is kind of an Instagram crop. And then I multiplied it by 4 for my render, just for high quality. But that's basically an Instagram crop, 4:5, pretty much. And then I started to bring in these other elements, like the camping with the meme bus, or with the Volkswagen bus and the guy. You can see them coming in over here. I brought in some more environment stuff. I brought in the balloons. And I brought in this sort of underwater scene. There it is. And that's it. So we go from one piece of art shot in one location to another whole piece of art in a different location. And this is, for me, this is kind of like, holy crap, we can do something pretty cool here, because like I can make something from a real world location, just like if we went out and I was doing a photo shoot for an influencer or, a brand. You could go and pay for a fee, get a location. You could shoot a bunch of different projects and concepts at it, but once you're done, you got to leave. So I'm living inside of this kind of world now in Cathedral in Sedona, where I can start to create anything that my mind can imagine from this location, as long as I have the data. But you'll notice that the difference between this and this is just a slow, movement of the camera low to the scene. But watch what happens when you change the camera angle, right? As soon as you go up here, the whole scene falls apart. You can see the same thing here. not too bad. There's still data, but you can see the cracks in the mountain. You can see that there's nothing really down here. And of course, if you go backwards in the scene, you get this. Still pretty cool. You got kind of the cool lighting going on. You've got, you know, the balloons, but this is not real. It's not at the actual location. So I want to actually bring these into software where you can walk around in the scene. And in order to do that, you've got to have a cohesive, consistent terrain. And what I've been working on this week is to gather data from different sources, bring it together, and try to create like a high res and low res version of the scene that we can actually use and manipulate and experience in a tool called Unreal Engine. So I'll show you some stuff here. This is probably going to be, you know, it's not going to look like a lot of progress, but I can kind of just have to trust me that this type of thing, you know, is definitely a bit of a challenge to get running. I'm just seeing if I can get, I hate QGIS. So let me just get, well, let's go backwards. I don't know if this is going to totally slow down what I'm doing, but we're going to try it. So I'm going to launch Unreal Engine. Actually, to be safe, I'm going to kill this. I'll let this run overnight. I was hoping it would be finished. I'll show you an example of this. This is using Blender to bring in Google 3D Tile. So basically like an offline version of Google Maps that I can manipulate and use for my 3D renders. It just takes a long time to download the data. Okay, so here's kind of where this is sitting at this moment as a bit of a work in progress. So this is Unreal Engine. This is, you know, software that has been around for a while, but Unreal Engine 5 in particular was like a big breakthrough when it came to, you know, what was possible with 3D engines and what I kind of do. So you can kind of see this is kind of weird because there's grass here instead of, you know, actual rock, but I'm going to show you in a second, you know, how this works. If we take a peek around the scene, you can see we've actually got the real world terrain inside of Unreal Engine. And there's a couple issues here that I'll explain in a second. The first one is you can kind of see how there's this mound here that kind of drops off. Well, the actual reason for this was that I wanted to make these scenes completely like islands in the landscape. So if you zoom out, you can kind of see it. So see how we've got this circular perimeter around the scene? Well, this is because I actually want to make it so that the bounds of the scene are actually an ocean. And I do that because, one, it's like a more cohesive experience when it comes to, you know, 3D. There's like a definitive boundary to the scene. And there's, you know, you might argue that it's better to have the mountain ranges and stuff in the background. But for what I'm doing specifically, I wanted to have it just set up with the ability to create an ocean. It's a Fortnite thing that I'll show you in a second. But if I go in here, we've got some clouds going on, and I can even, you know, if this doesn't crash, I can even show you a little fluid simulation called Flux. Called Coast, I think is the, let's grab this one. It is called Fluid Flux Coastline Blueprints Domain. This is a really cool Unreal Engine 5 fluid simulator. It is meant to sort of simulate oceans and lakes and rivers. And if I bring this in first, I think that's going to do it. And then I also have to grab a coastline. And I have to link the coastline, I think, to this one. And then under the coastline, I've got to bring in a wave. This may not actually work exactly the way I want, but you'll get the idea. I'm going to bring in a wave, and I'm going to go to the coastline surface, and I'm going to change the wave actor to this. And now I'm going to go to, I think it's the domain, and I've just got to experiment here a little bit. Yeah. It's not exactly the right way to do this, but you'll get the idea, and then I can adjust it after. There you go. So all I did was I brought in this sort of ocean. You can see that, you know, it now has a little bit of a coast. It's not actually running the way that it should, but it has a little bit of a coastline here. And you can see that, you know, the water is actually high enough that it's filling parts of this area, which is where there actually would be a river. But I can actually just change that and just drop it down by minus 16,500. And now we've got still a little bit here, minus 1,700, 17,000. And I think that should be good. So now at least we have, you know, kind of a coastline, and you can now see that when you're kind of looking at it, you know, in this location, you can see that it's actually sort of sitting here a little bit more, you know, exposed than if it was just a regular terrain. Okay, so now in here, there's some fun stuff that we can do. And the first one that's really, you know, simple but easy or really neat is if we hit play and we actually flip this to full screen. There we go. You actually see we got some pretty cool water physics going on already. And I just happened to pick a spot underwater, and I don't actually know if I would be going in the right direction to get out of it. I don't see any mountains. This is how people drown, right here. But like if I just go back out, see where I was, and just pick this same spot and hit play here, go back. Let this load, hit F11. You can see that we actually have an interactive world. This is sort of a first person mode, but you can see, you know, it feels, even though this is grass and this is not actually what we want, which I'll adjust in a second, it kind of feels like you're in something that is pretty close to the real scale of the scene. And that was calculations I ran, importing the data in an attempt to bring this into something that was as close as possible to the real world location. And the effort here to get this right is really where this pays off, because if I do, and I bring all the data in properly, and once I actually sort of get some proper texturing in here and some detail, you'll find that probably around here, I think it's going to be a little further. Actually, just skip this a little bit ahead. I can tell you where it is. It's not, I cut it off a little bit in the scene, so I have to actually go back and re-import the data. But I think it's around here at this location on the shoreline. Like about here is where, you know, we would actually be viewing Cathedral Rock. So the detail's not here yet. It's coming in, but you can kind of get a feel for that same shape, which is, you know, something like this, which I'll grab a screenshot of just for my screen. And you can see if I bring this in, paste this, it's a bit of a crop because it did both. So let's just do that again. That goes Earth, Command Shift S, and we'll just do a box select, and we'll just grab this here. Okay, cool. So I grab this, delete this one, and paste that in. Right, so now you can see we've got something that, even though is, you know, the detail's not here, it doesn't, you know, lots of reasons why this is not as good as this. You can see the outline, and you can see that it's starting to kind of take shape as being very similar to what we have going on over here. And once we can get this fidelity of scene with, you know, the proper colors and texture and detail into this 3D world, things get really fun and things get really interesting, because the you know, how easily with an Unreal Engine, we can manipulate things, and we can start to say, like, what would it be like if we played the game from here? Oh, we put ourselves right on the edge of a cliff, but here we are standing at the top of the map, looking out at, what it would look like being in actual Cathedral. And I'll tell you that this sort of something I did in another scene, and we can actually, we can throw ourselves if we want, right off the side of the mountain, and we'll do this kind of free fall all the way down Cathedral. There we go. Luckily, there's no kind of crash, but yeah, you can look back up and see it. So we are now really, you can start to see how it could come together. If you've ever hiked this location, we could really start creating a cool landscape. The other thing that we can do that's really, really neat about this is we can say, well, that was just like a first-person view, but really easily we can go, because of Unreal Engine, we can add a feature pack, and we can say, let's see what this would look like in third person. Add that to the pack. Scroll up here. Just bring in third person game mode, third person character. Go into our project settings, and we should change our map and mode to third person game mode. And go here. And now when we hit play, just like that, we have an actual third-person game mode. Now you can see, the graphics. And this is with really no, this is really like, I gotta say, this is almost no actual work done. Some of the other stuff that we've been working on, or I've been working on, is pretty incredible. And but you can get a feel for the vision when you have this sort of entire area of the map that you can explore that is 100% based on a real location. Let's just do this to kind of re-show that one spot. Same idea here, you kind of spawn at the top of this spot, you can work your way up, even jump, and there's other features that I've sort of can add in, but you get to the top, and here you are on the top of Cathedral Rock, actually walking around with the real terrain data and real location. Okay, so other things on this one, just to to kind of just close the gap on where we are here, is, let's see what we have for lighting. So we're using a plugin called Ultra Dynamic Sky. I have some scripting in this to do some really cool day-night stuff and actually link everything to the real data. But to show you kind of the short version of this, we can just change the time of day and go to like much more kind of dynamic lighting, like this. We can change the cloud coverage. We can bring this all the way down so it's, basically we're at sunset. We can bring the amount of fog up in the scene all the way to this or something like that. And now, that same idea of hitting play up here, you can see the lighting is completely changed. The rocks are now much more red. Although this is actually just sort of not a good representation of what the actual rocks. And you can see now we've got fog in the scene in every direction, and we've even got a sunset going on over here. And this is very, very, very basic. Like I have a lot more here in other scenes that I have set up, including, some stuff with the night shots. So we can turn on Aurora over top of the scene, which is super cool. We can do like real volumetric clouds. We can change, let's see, time of day settings. We can animate the time of day. We can change this to full cinematic quality clouds. We can turn on some volumetrics. So let's see, cloud shadows, advanced, simulate sun. I've even been able to, which is probably my favorite feature, is you can actually, if you put in the real world data and you figure out where there's a solar eclipse at the certain time, you'll actually can see, you can actually see the sun go behind the clouds in an eclipse, which is really, really cool. And it's something that I'll definitely want to simulate when it comes to doing this. For future projects. So yeah, just to get an idea, you know, the sun's even setting more here. I think it might be simulating, but if we bring the sun back up a little bit, you know, we've got a little bit more light rays going on. We could change a little bit of the fog coverage like this. And now we've got some cool lighting on the scene, and we can even change the yaw, so we can bring, oh, not the north yaw, sorry. We have to simulate real sun. And then we can turn on, there's the aurora, there's our sunrise, like this. And then we can actually simulate, change the north. So we can change where the sun is in the scene. You can see we've got, you know, some pretty cool effects, including even, you know, we can change the bottom altitude of the clouds, bring them down over top of the landscape. And even though this looks a little bit fake right now, you can really see the potential. You know, if I kind of bring my guy up here and hit play, you can start to see the potential of, you know, the nice light bloom, and I guess the cloud stuff. It's still loading, but you can actually see now we're above the clouds. So if I wanted to go even crazier, and yeah, see the clouds were going by, but if I want to change the amount of clouds, you know, to something like this, and then if we want to turn down that cloud movement, .001. Okay, so something like this. Now, get into some pretty crazy stuff with our character sort of sitting up in the clouds on top of this mountain, and we can, you know, really see the fog coming in. I mean, and this is just me, you know, hitting a couple buttons. Like, this gets really, really fun once we actually start to work with the data. So that's that. Just to kind of show you some of the potential stuff that I'm working on, excuse me, is I'll just put our light back up, and I'll bring our clouds down, and I'll bring our fog down, and maybe we'll bring our lighting to something like that. Just something that we can see. We'll just bring our cloud altitude up. It's like that. So the one of the things I'm working on, and I'll start on next week, but just to give you a preview of what this is, I don't know if I have it in this file, but I can kind of do a demonstration. So I've been working on a landscape material, because one of the things obviously that here is, like, we don't want grass. So this is one that I've been kind of studying and learning how they did it. I can use it. I've used it in projects before, but I actually want to make my own from scratch, so I have kind of unlimited flexibility and something that will scale instead of relying on a third party. But shout out to this one. This is Brushify. They did a pretty incredible job with this. And truthfully, I would use it, and I have used it. I think I really want to have something that I can fully control myself. So, but I'll just show you an idea. So all I did here is I'm just taking the landscape and I'm just painting it with all desert. So you'll see in probably a few seconds as Unreal Engine updates the entire thing. I'm just going to go check out the stream here, because it's so interesting. I'm going to have to learn how this tool works. Title and description. It's fine. Just looking for kind of any information here on what's going on with the stream. I don't really have anything. Also stalling while this goes. Mini feed. Stream preview. Okay, there we go. Audio mixer, editor display. Okay, I'll come back to this. Yeah, so there we go on our scene. So just like that, now we have a much more red rock focused scene. And just like we did before, if we hit play, we have still some grass. I know this is, you know, changeable, but underneath that grass, you can see we've got, you know, much more, you know, brown dirt. And the only thing that sort of I don't like about this is that the texture between the red rock on the ground and what's up here is not that different. So you don't get that same kind of effect that we were getting with the other one. And if you look close, you can see there's some issues with this texture. But all of those things I have a plan and a fix for. But you can do something like say, well, let's do, like we know that this is a river valley. For example, if we look at the map, there's sort of a river valley running through here. We could just simply go into the grass and we could go to our paint and change our brush size, and we could start to decide that this whole area of the map is actually going to be, you know, kind of a grassland area. And we can get into crazy things like, you know, putting rivers through here and trees and foliage and all that stuff. So there's a whole plan for this. This obviously looks, you know, really bad because it's just a you know, it's just a simple paintbrush that I'm using. But one of the things that kind of exciting about this is just adding some noise to break it up. I really didn't want to go down this path. Yeah, it's going to rebuild it. Let's not go there. But at least you can just kind of get an idea. If I go right click, I hit play from here. You'll see that, you know, we go from kind of this desert area here with really no grass, just sort of walking through, into, you know, this grassy area here where all of a sudden we've got full grass and sort of different dirt. So a custom landscape would mean that I can really manipulate this. I can decide what's going to be on the landscape, how much grass, how, you know, this grass is obviously very green for Sedona, so we'll make dry grass. This even has like a dry grass mode in Brushify, so they have a lot of tools in here. Dry grass looks like this. There's probably less grass, and I'm sure it actually, when you get down to it, I'm sure it actually is, maybe not. Yeah, it's a little bit more dry, but it's not a lot. You kind of see. There we go. So we got some dry grass. So, you know, if we got into creating this proper desert landscape, we'd probably want to have some version of this kind of dirt as the base layer. Then we'd have different patches of grass, and then we could add in, you know, some cactus and some different plants, and then we could start to carve out our paths and all this fun stuff. So this is where we're going. This is my afternoon stream as I work on this stuff. It's all very experimental, and certainly almost everything I do has someone out there who has, you know, tackled it or done it. But what I haven't seen yet is someone pull it all together with like really good, realistic 3D landscapes that are textured properly, photorealistic, to be able to place a camera anywhere in that scene and take something that looks like a really good landscape photo, but also have some interactivity, the ability to run around, the ability to sort of experience the landscape in a unique way. So this is where we are for Unreal Engine. I tried to do this on the last stream. I don't think it's going to work, but just to try, I'll save this to Cathedral 2, so something I'm working on. And then I'm going to try it. I don't remember why this wasn't launching last time. It might have just been because I was doing something, like I was using too many programs at once. Kind of rings a bell for why this wasn't working on the last stream. But let me try this. I think it's... I'll try this one first. I honestly can't remember now. I got on my list to go through. I was trying to upgrade to Unreal Engine 5.3 because 5.3 is 5.3 for Unreal Engine introduces something called nanite landscapes, and without getting into too crazy technical rant, that basically allows you to sort of visualize a landscape in 3D at almost any size, and really does a great job of sort of handling some of the issues that you would get with performance in doing that. So I'm just going to see if this file opens up. This is kind of my like, oh yeah, it's going to crash. And I think that if I tried to open it in the other version, so I might have to just clean that up and get that running in. I'm just going to try one more file. If I remember, this one might be good, except it's located. No, it's okay. It's an older version, but I feel like this one works. It just may not be quite as snappy as what it should be. So we'll let this load. The other thing while that loads that I'm just looking at the stream now. I got to figure out a cool way to do this. For people that are not streamers, I'm brand new to this, so it's kind of crazy. It blows my mind. Like while we're streaming, I could just move that up. And I can move, this around. And, I've been thinking about, what would be like a cool layout that would have some more information about what I'm doing, but also be easier for people to follow. You can also crop this down and do all sorts of fun stuff. So I haven't quite figured it out yet, but, yeah, this is me sort of experimenting with the stream, and you probably see that moving around in real time. It still blows my mind that you can do that. I don't know why. It's just crazy that you can be broadcasting on the internet and then you can bring in, pretty much anything you want. I was looking at some of these things like widgets and stuff. I've been looking at like bringing in, like how to bring in, my social media links. Like I wanted to be able to have some stuff with Twitter. Let's see. Supporter goal, credits, stream boss, viewer count, chat box, the jar, follower goal, tip trigger, scenes. Yeah, so here's like a follower goal. Follower goal. I think on Twitch, I don't know if where to search for. I think on Twitch I hit 20 the other day. So let's say the goal is 50. I think I'm at right now. Let's say 21. And I could start the goal. Field is required. And after 09, 30, how many days? September? So we'll say 30, 23. I don't know if that just crashed. That just crashed again. Anyway, I was just there. So there you go. So you should see this follower goal. And it's like, I haven't done anything here in terms of, formatting and templates. There's so much stuff in this that I want to work on. But, I might end up having the stream kind of like this with some background stuff and whatever. Something I'm working on after this. Okay. This did work, so I think this might be kind of a fun demo. I think this is my current work in progress. You can see this sort of jungle gym thing was just an experiment with what a scene might look like in space. I think I have my nephew in here as a character. We were doing some 3D scanning. We were actually going and face scanning people and, bringing them in as metahumans, which is like a cool representation of like a real person in these games. Yeah, this is him. So it's my cousin actually. So you can see we created this kind of cool scene, and you've got the sun the earth, and sort of this little table here. And some kind of like sunlighting. It was just sort of an experiment to see what it would look like if we kind of had a scene in space. But yeah, that's this one here. You can kind of see what it looks like. It's pretty incredible with 3D stuff, what you can do. And then I don't know if this will work, but I'm going to bring into Sedona, which is the first ever scene I did. And this is the one that I was experimenting with. And I went to Cathedral for a bunch of reasons, just because I'm currently working on it. I got a project releasing hopefully soon. I just wanted to not be flipping between different scenes or, you know, like different landscapes. It just becomes really, really tough to follow and to continue to, you know, work when you're working, like you're jumping from Oregon at the one day and then you're jumping to Arizona and you're just sort of all over the place. But if this loads, which it might not, this is kind of my current progress. And actually I can see now there's a couple issues, but I think generally it's running. Let me just, maybe the lighting is, something I gotta fix. I think we're double lighting this thing. Yeah, I think we're double lighting it. The trees aren't working, but at least we can get an idea of this. And this is the Oregon coast landscape. The quality has kind of gotten weird, but generally this is it. And you can see there's, you know, a full coastline going on over here. This is a pretty massive scene. You know, there's a full coastline going on over here. This road area that's going all the way down the side. We've got some clouds coming in. And then all the way down to this location is a lighthouse area. And you can see in this one, if I hit play, we should have an actual character in here. And I might even think I have, so it's pulled together and it's loading all the textures. And now it's going to prepare shaders. So now this is like where you run into issues with this just loading and loading while we're streaming. But yeah, it's going to be a little bit choppy, but you can kind of see the player being able to walk around and they can jump. They can run. And I think I even have like a ragdoll mechanic in this one. So they can fly off the scene. So that was kind of the work in progress. There's a bunch of stuff messed up here. I can see like the trees don't have textures. The lighting's all weird, but that's currently where we're at. And I'm slowly bringing together some of these 3D scenes. Okay. One more thing to show, and then if there's no questions, we'll sort of maybe just jump into some of the current work. I've got about a half an hour left. So the vision here long term, and if I could kind of draw this out, it's kind of bad I don't have the images, but it's first to create like an actual 3D scene that's representative of the real world. Like it's real location. It's all we call georeferenced. Everything's connected together. Everything works in cohesion. So the locations are accurate. And I've made a lot of progress on that. This has been kind of my stress this week, is to get this right. But I'll show you what happens when it starts to come together. So this is really bad terrain data, but I actually could probably grab some of the better data to see it. But you can see there's almost no detail here. This is really low res free data. But I think the concept here is what's kind of cool. So when you overlay this with actual satellite data, you get something like this. So you can now start to see a little bit of information. You can see where there's trees, you can see where there's rocks, you can see, you know, where things are, but notice that all of the terrain up here is basically a mush because this comes in from super low res data and it's not precise enough to pick up the individual blocks here in this scene. But what it is able to do, which is cool, is actually able to go out and get data on the buildings. So notice that all of the buildings on this road actually have real locations, and that goes across the entire map. So when you use real world data, you can go out to an open data set like OSM, even though this is slightly off. I mean, it's not that bad, but it's slightly off. You can go out to something like OSM, And you can actually get real locations, real floor plans for buildings, and import them into these tools. And I think, if I remember right, there's some things that are accurate about this and some that aren't. Like the number of floors and the number of actual, the look of these buildings are not accurate, but the height is accurate and the floor plan is accurate. So if you look at this from a top-down view, you can see, these line up pretty well with the buildings. And you just probably have to adjust sometimes a little bit for, different things, but you could actually go in if you wanted and, you can manipulate some of these individual buildings or line them up exactly you want, but you have the data. And now if you texture these, you can make this look, really realistic. And if you wanted to render a real scene from inside one of these buildings and have it look out at the actual landscape, it would actually be accurate and real. So it really opens up a massive amount of possibilities when it comes to these things. You can also see there's this white line going up into the landscape. And this is really cool because if you scroll down here and look at this location, there we go. It actually starts at like a parking lot. And this is a trailhead, and this is actually Cathedral Rock trailhead. And you can see it carves around through the landscape and goes up into this area here. And eventually it finds its way up into the middle of Cathedral Rock. And this is actually the vortex and actually the Cathedral Rock Trail, where you can walk across this ridge and actually stand here and kind of sit between the two. Doesn't look very good now because we don't have real data, but when we bring the real data in, we can have an accurate trail that we can not only highlight on the map, but we can actually manipulate the terrain to make it realistic. Like we can have, grass and sort of rocks on the terrain, and then where the trail is, it's like cleared out just like it would in a real trail. So in the game or in the experience, you could actually walk the real Cathedral Rock Trail with, a pretty high level of precision and accuracy, and actually feel what it would be like, or actually experience what it'd be like to walk from this location all the way up to the top of Cathedral Rock. Or you could just fly a drone or, take a shortcut. But the point is you can actually experience that using real data. And then, it can get really fun because if we wanted to go into here and let's see, turn the lights out, now we have actual glow coming from the trail. And you kind of imagine we could create a really cool shot of this trail going up into the mountain range using the actual real trail location. So it's almost unlimited what we can do. We could even go into the buildings themselves and we could decide, okay, this building, we're going to change the texture to our trail mission or whatever the trail one was. I think it was this. Cathedral Rock Trail. Yeah, GPX. So we can go into, the buildings, and we could say, let's change this to GPX. And now all of a sudden our buildings light up, or at least some of our buildings light up, and we can go to the other buildings in the scene. And we could change it as well. There's just multiple different ones, but we could change them all to GPX. And you can see we're starting to light up our buildings. And these are individual textures, so we could literally just change all the brick to emission or all the roofs to emission or whatever. But you can see now we've got some cool lighting going on all the buildings on the scene. So I hope this makes sense. Hey, Rayhan, I appreciate it. Sorry, I just saw your chat now. I still am working on a better way to do this where I can actually see stuff coming in. I just realized my chat's probably hidden here. Somewhere I've got a chat on the screen. I just don't know why it's not working. But hey, Rayhan on YouTube, I appreciate you. I'll drop you a quick chat here and see. See if that works. And I can't chat. Okay. Interesting. Side note for people that are streamers. I've been experimenting with OBS and Streamlabs and also now Restream, which is what's been doing all of my streams like out to different channels. And this is my first time using Streamlab, and I can see there being some benefits to it, but I also can see like absolute like things I don't like, including the chat. I had Restream was really cool because I could post out to all my channels at the same time and see all the stats on them and flip between the streams. So I might have to go back to OBS and then just find some plugins and stuff to make it do some of the things that I want to on Streamlab. Okay, so that's the real world data. We've also got some stuff with 3D tiles. I'll show this really quick. This was an experiment that I was doing yesterday. This is the Google 3D tile stuff brought into Blender. And you can see that it is like, okay, so here's the difference. So here's my data and here's Google's. So that's actually a really bad example. I think I might have messed that up, and I think the actual, all the scale and everything, I think I was manipulating this, so I think we kind of messed this up. That's going to be a problem. No, yeah, I think we messed it up. Oh well. I can't really demonstrate this, but this is the Google data, and you'll notice that like it does actually pull out some decent resolution, but there's sort of a lot of issues with this terrain, and it looks good when you put an image over top because you kind of hide some of those actual artifacts in the terrain. But the truth is this is actually really good, and I've been looking at how I could sort of pull some of this data out and start to use it in other 3D software. At worst, this is where the terrain is really good, is outside of this range. When we get into where we shot that photo, which I think I said before was somewhere right here. You know, even at this resolution, you can see like a little bit more of the landscape. You can kind of see where there's ridges here, ridges going down. There's a bit more of a ridge here or a bit more of a cliff. And this type of data is something I would want to pull in, and then we can actually do some really cool erosion stuff in, we do some really cool stuff in a tool called Gaia to add detail to the terrain. So, you know, this is very flat. If you bring it back to HIS, you can see there's a little bit of detail, but it's pretty light. And also, big limitation of the Google terrain is that all these trees get brought in because when they do their scanning, there's no way for them to basically block out the trees. So you get all these individual tree files, which are actually completely ruin any landscape experience that you want to make in like something like Unreal Engine, because you want to place trees here, not have them as bumps on the terrain. But something like the edges where you have really bad data usually in your scans. So like my scan is pretty good, but there's just some, it's kind of like a mix match. Like some stuff is good within this Google data. Some stuff is good within my data, but you can see over here is where I don't have any data, any detail. And what I really want to do is bring in kind of a combination of these two where I would have, you know, my data for the good parts and then use some of the Google data for this. So that's what I'm working on next week, is like merging this data together and bringing it into one file so I can bring it into Unreal Engine and make it as realistic as possible. The other thing that we did last week is we were working on manipulating this terrain in this tool called Gaia. And this one is really cool. I don't know what my best version is here. I think it's this one. So if we let this load, It's just loading the simulation thing that it did. Let's give it a second. Taking a peek at it. Okay. Hopefully this works. Yeah, so this is me starting to sort of experiment with adding detail to a terrain. So you saw here how in this one, there was a lot more elevation, a lot more detail. I think what Google's doing is exaggerating the terrain a little bit to kind of make everything feel a little bit more like epic, because the human eye is like real trouble perceiving elevation, things that don't look like they look like massive changes. It's all, to do with like focal length and the way our eyes see things. But I think that they've exaggerated a lot of this stuff, but I actually need to follow that plan. I need to exaggerate some of the terrain, because even though I want it to be realistic when it comes to where the roads are, where the streams are, where the trails are, I do want it to feel like the actual heights and the actual, contours and stuff when you use it in, or when you're experiencing it in these virtual environments. But one of the things that I've been working on is like, well, what do you do when your terrain looks like this? So truthfully, this is actually what the terrain looks like. We've got a lot of detail here in this middle part. Yeah, we've got a lot of detail here in this middle part. Pre-eroded, yeah, stratify. But we don't have really any detail outside in this part, because this is sort of free data that we had. And I've been kind of just playing around with some elevations, making this look right. But watch what happens when we start to apply some procedural stuff. We can add a bit of stratification to the terrain. So we're in, Arizona here. So this would have natural strata as opposed to being, just flat surfaces. Then we can apply some erosion to it, some terraces, and we can adjust displacement. And now you got something that starts to feel like, well, it doesn't look like that much difference between this high quality terrain and this lower quality terrain. There's before and after. So I think this is a big deal, and I think this is going to really help when it comes to the terrain and loading it in. And then we can sort of denoise it, which was sort of making it so there's no sharp edges. And then I combined it with this map here to make it into an island. And this is actually what I exported and is running in Unreal Engine. So we're slowly working on it. The only issue is that the actual location that I shot the photo is still out of this frame. So I've been sort of changing it, adjusting it, getting it right, and then bringing it into to Unreal Engine and starting to work with it. So that's really the main progress, I guess, in terms of what I've been working on this week. Big push next week is going to be on the meme card. So morning is more about, kind of the well-known stuff, the stuff that I'm comfortable with. It's not experimental. I might, every once in a while, I might take on something in the project that I've never really done or I haven't had a lot of experience in. But for the most part, I'm just working away in 3D and sharing my progress. So this is the focus for next week. You can see if we go turn this one on. There's a few little things that I want to clean up in here. Nothing crazy, but let's just kind of look around the scene. There's, this some artwork that's sort of scattered around here that I want to, you can see even this one here. It looks like it's floating above the surface. Just kind of sits like it's sitting there. Maybe it's this one. I think it's just the way that it's floating and sitting on this. So I want to kind of make a scene here that makes more sense with the art kind of piled up and waiting. Some of the ones on top. Added this headlamp to this little dude last week, I think on Friday or Thursday, which is super cool, which is adding this light beam going up into the sky. I think we've got mostly done this dude, the Pepe. He is the guy who's converted from the actual guy that's fishing. I think this one is pretty good. There's some details around this setup. I've got my old blender donut that I did way back, and I actually added some glow to the sprinkles and to the icing. So that's been added into the scene, kind of as an Easter egg. There's some stuff with the tent that I wouldn't mind doing. I thought about maybe a little dog character or something kind of sitting in here would be kind of fun to make this, come to life a bit more. The big one that I actually have to do that's kind of driving me nuts is this rainbow colored fishing line. So what I have to do is either try to make the whole thing smaller, although I think it's like literally as small as I can get it. Maybe it needs to have some thickness to it, but I'm trying to get it. Oh, maybe that's good. Yeah, basically I'm trying to get the thickness of this thing down to like small as I can get it, and then actually have it lighting up. See how it's sort of coming in as more render passes get added. So that's probably what it is. What happens with lighting in these scenes is like at first they look like the lighting takes a while to come in because it's calculating where the light is and bouncing off of all this atmosphere, and then eventually it gets there. But I think this is even just like a simple fix, but is a lot better. So just the thickness of the line has changed quite a bit. And you can kind of see it now. It takes a while to load in, and actually just to kind of simulate this a little bit easier, I can go here and I'm just changing the edit mode. I'll just change the camera focus. Okay, I'll change the camera focus to so it's focused on the cigar. I'll just change it to the bobber, and look at that. See, it comes in. Now you can kind of see what's going on here. It's kind of cool. There's a little bit of detail I need to add, but you can see, that line is really small, and then it's got this glow. So I think that's going to work, and then we could probably go into the bobber again, or the line, if I can get it. Yeah, fishing line night. We've got kind of the rainbow in here. The emission, we can even bring the emission up. So it might even be brighter and create like kind of more of a bloom, but the actual one is quite a bit smaller. So you also see kind of here, where it gets really fun with the cameras and stuff. So, we're focused on the bobber versus if we could focus on, this dude, now all of a sudden the focus changes here. We can also change the f-stop. This is not simulating proper f-stop because it's not the right scale, which is something that kind of bothers me. But so you can focus on the bus over here. You can focus again on the bobber. Focus on mountain range. When you lower that depth of field, you can really, manipulate kind of the look and the feel of the scene. Now I don't know where my bobber went. There we go. And then we can also change the depth of field to sort of incorporate everything. Oh, that's not it. No, depth of field. Say f-stop 4. Now we got kind of a little bit more of everything in the scene. Now we could change, you know, this to our guy again. It's a cigar. And now we've got a little bit more focus, and I kind of tune that in and pick something that kind of has a bit of both. So a little bit of blur down here, but not quite as, you know, this, I think it was something like this, maybe 0.14. Yeah, it was probably like that. And then, you know, I could change it a little bit more so we get that in focus. Just sort of while we're here, you know, to kind of maybe end the stream in terms of a demonstration, just going again to why I love 3D stuff so much is if I was to duplicate this camera. So this is my camera, the current active one. Don't ask me why that's not duplicating. It's like my keyboard's not working. I just forgot what the shortcuts are. No, I definitely have an issue. Okay, I'll just do this here and I won't save it. So, you know, if I wanted to kind of get fun with this, I could do something like this. I could set the camera, and you could actually track it to an object. So, for example, if I wanted to track this guy, the camera would now focus in on him no matter where it is in the scene. So it just basically turned the camera to be there. So now it's always going to focus on his headlamp. And again, we can go back to our aperture and we can change it. We'll change it back to what it was, which is this 0.14. So now it's just super blurry. Now what happens is because it's focusing on this dude, I can change the location and it's not gonna lose focus. So it's super slow to load. I'll bring this out a little bit more so you can see it. It's just slow because there's a lot going on here. But you can see that if I go, I'll bring it over here so it's not blocking by the stream. So if I bring the camera location wherever I want, you can imagine like an animation. Panning all the way through without really doing any, all I'm doing is moving the location of the camera, and the camera is perfectly tracking this character. And you see it, you know, better obviously if I was in like this mode. I change this to random so you kind of see it. This is what's happening, right? Literally the camera is just going from here to here without losing track of our dude. And I can say, all right, well, let's move the camera this way too. Okay, so now the camera is here. And maybe I could do like a cool scene where I could bring this down. And now I could actually change the focal length of the camera. So right now it's at 31. We could zoom it in. And change the location a little bit, maybe down. Actually change now the tilt. Is interesting because it's going to focus on the headlamp. So I can't actually tilt down the camera. If I try to, nothing happens because it's locked into his headlamp. But what I could do is I can go, for example, I can grab the headlamp. Let's turn this on for a second. Okay, I can grab the headlamp and I can... Okay, so I can grab the headlamp here. And I can bring the 3D cursor to there, and I can add a new empty. So see this little thing? This now can be a target for the camera. So instead of actually telling the camera to focus on our cigar, we can change, or sorry, not the cigar. First of all, focus on the empty, okay? And change the constraint, which is the target, to that empty. I think it was empty 01. Yep. So now, we still have that same effect, right? We can kind of move the camera wherever we want. We can move it over here. We can move it down. We can move it up, and it's always going to track. But now if we want a little bit more control over a shot, we can grab the empty and we can actually move it. So we can say, let's focus in on his face. So now we have full control of that camera. And it gets really crazy because we could animate where we want this to be in the scene. So we could have this move, and it's basically full control like you would a cinematic camera in the scene. And if we hit render, take a second update. And as it slowly, deals with probably some clipping, let's see, probably some clipping of other objects and stuff, you can kind of slowly see it's bringing in that scene with the character. And if we want to go, up, go this way. Oh, okay. That's my own stupid mistake. So I was moving the the target, not the actual camera. So now, we can move the camera around wherever we want in the scene. We can bring it up. We can bring it down. And the only thing that's sort of holding this back is just the time that it's going to take for this to bring in this render. So you can imagine if I had a 24 millimeter camera, now we're here, we can go back down to a low level. You can even go underwater. So this is the underwater part. Get rid of these things so we can't see it. And now, you just have this like unlimited control, and really all that's missing is the ability for us to just say, okay, let's set the camera and animate it. I mean, it literally as easy as we could animate it from position 1 to position 2 and then leave it overnight. And in 8 hours, it will render out every one of those scenes in 8K. And then we come back in the morning, we've got a video. So that could be something fun for me to do next week, is just sort of do a little promo video or a test. But got a little list of things to do to complete the scene. I'll say by the end of next week, I'll have the fully completed artwork from here. The meme card will be done, and hopefully we'll have a much more interactive version of the Unreal Engine experience using the real world data. So progress is made. Appreciate people that have tuned in and all the questions and comments, and people that have supported this. It's certainly starting off with some more technical stuff, but once I get in the groove, it'll be a lot more of like the fun, exciting things, and I'm happy to help and teach and share anything that I